And welcome to our healthcare panel in the I Am The Cavalry track at BSides Las Vegas. Our panel will be moderated by Josh Corman. He will introduce the four panelists himself. As a reminder, these talks are being recorded and streamed. So please, when we get to the question and answer session, please raise your hand and I'll run a mic over to whoever has the question. If you can silent your cell phones. And we need to thank our sponsors, and my little paper disappeared. So we had Amazon and Verisprite, Source of Knowledge, Protivity, and I'm missing one, and I can't remember which one it is. It's on my. There you go. Thank you to our stellar sponsors, and here's Josh Corman.
All right. Hey, long time no see. And sorry we got a little crunch in that last one, but we're going to make all of these videos available and answer any questions. There's also an ABC Nightline piece on that. We wanted to do that to set some stage for what's going on with medical device security, with the disclosure, with how we're trying to create a visceral experiential learning for hospital administrators, physicians, nurses, so we can take it from a belief that we'll be okay and prepared to knowing where we need to shore up and be more resilient. And this is very aligned with something we've been working on for a year. So part of the CISA Act, or the Computer Information Sharing Act, or depending on who you ask, this passed in December of 2015, and most of you know it as the Information Sharing Act that allowed safe harbor for information sharing in the private sector. One of the provisions and one of the sections called for a one-year task force for healthcare cybersecurity across the sectors. Healthcare is a very varied sector. With device manufacturers, pharma, bio, hospital delivery organizations, all sorts of stakeholder groups. So they asked for a one-year task force. There were 21 task force members. I'm probably going to flip to Emory to outline the constituents and the process. And while we couldn't bring 21 of them to the Hacker Conference and DEF CON, we brought, there's 5 of us here represented. And we published this report, unfortunately, a little after WannaCry. But we had hoped to really put some uncomfortable truths in front of Congress, HHS, stakeholder groups, and be honest, candid, forthright on what we saw as a situation, hopefully have some actionable recommendations for short-term, mid-term, long-term. But we went for it. We didn't pull punches. We went really far down the rabbit hole on certain things that are wicked problems like workforce, like legacy technologies, like the disparate rates of change in the economics of how long these devices are used. And while we didn't think we solved everything, we said, you know, maybe no one's going to read this because healthcare is such a partisan topic, but when something really, really bad happens, we want them to be able to have something actionable and a blueprint for making things better. And, you know, the good news, bad news is with the near miss of WannaCry, we had that compelling event and the reason to look. So I did a lot of the exposition in the last section, and if you weren't here for that, I apologize, but we did record it. Mostly I want to hear from these guys because we it's supposed to be a year-long task force. I think we went more like a year and a half, it feels like. And I kept making the joke that the healthcare task force was hazardous for our health. But let me introduce some of our esteemed colleagues on this in this order. Michael McNeil is from Philips, very forward-leaning on things like coordinated disclosure, voluntarily producing software bill of materials, et cetera, and was a very strong voice of a large device manufacturer. Rob Suarez from BD, also a very strong voice. We pulled him in at some point in the middle, and he was a tremendous addition, jumped right in, didn't miss a beat. Emory Shulak from HHS was the co-chair from the government side, and Jackie Monson from Sutter Health was one of our voices of the clinical risks and challenges. And Emory, why don't we start with you as one of the co-chairs and as the government voice here on the process, the approach, and any opening remarks you have.
Yeah, again, Emory Shulak from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Just to kind of give everybody a little bit of a background, after the legislation was released in December of 2015, we really stepped back and tried to find, a diverse set of people who can really represent, a range of the industry. We wanted, providers, we wanted insurers, we wanted, a whole gamut of individuals. And we really kind of settled on 21 because we really thought there's the ability of having too many people there and too many voices where you can't get anything done. too few voices where you're not really getting all the perspectives done. But we kind of, felt that 21 people really represented the story of the organization. And we really looked for people who had strong connections with the industry. We wanted people who had representation not only for their organization and would share the perspective of a large organization or a small organization, but we really wanted people who had a great understanding of, who were leaders in their trade groups, who were representatives. We didn't want executives from the trade groups. We wanted practitioners. We wanted people who were doing security every day, because too many times when we talk about security in the industry, we talk with CEOs. Well, the CEO may very well not have done anything in security ever, or may not have done security, in the last 20 years. We really wanted kind of an engaged workforce that is really going to kind of, change the language of this. So we really settled on 17, public partners who were really going to be able to move this conversation along. And we had 4 representatives from the government. We had NIST, DOD, DHS, and HHS. I was the HHS representative. And our role wasn't really to shape and form the consensus of where these recommendations and these activities were going. We were there to make sure that you didn't misrepresent or misstate a position that you were doing. So if you had a challenge and it was a regulatory body, you got the right regulatory body. If you were trying to come up with recommendations in terms of where to go with guidance, it's like you can name a specific organization with HHS, but in reality, maybe we can bring that up and just loosen that up a little bit to kind of talk about that. So what we looked at is we looked at 17 people who really had a great visibility into the organization, great connectivity in the organizations across the field, to kind of really raise kind of the issues and concerns that Josh had. And we had some great feedback across the sector to kind of highlight the challenges that everybody was facing. And I think what you do is we come out and we had kind of a roughly equal balance of recommendations that were kind of directed at the public sector, and an equal number of recommendations which were directed towards the government. And it really states the fact that there is really no one solution here. I think we hear a lot of gosh, there's a whole lot of things in this report. Well, yeah, there are a lot of things in this report, and what we want to be careful about is that we're not saying you have to absolutely do this one item and you're going to be good. There's a lot of things that we can do, and I'll let everybody talk about things that they really championed, and what we're looking for out of the report is champions in each of those areas, so we can move these things forward, knowing that we don't have unlimited resources, we don't have unlimited time, we don't have unlimited staff available to do this. How do we make this happen, and how do we prioritize this? The workforce itself was really just a starting point for the conversation, and how do we move that forward? So I'm going to let everybody else talk about their perspective on it, but really this was really a collaborative effort to kind of identify the challenges facing the sector and see if we can put something a little bit more concrete, a little bit more tangible around that people can act on.
Before we leave you, you had some good statistics last time we spoke about it wasn't just 21 people thinking they're smart, even though we're well represented. We did a lot of outreach. We took briefings from trade associations, et cetera. Do you remember any of those stats or the process?
I don't have them on me.
You were so effortless before.
Yeah, because last time I wrote them down.
But we did, I think we were supposed to do 4 meetings in person. I think we did 5. I think there's supposed to be a day each. We ended up doing about 2.5 to 3 days each. We were supposed to just do those and phone calls in between. We did weekly phone calls in subgroups. I think to a person, we just took it as a really serious responsibility. But one of the things we got maybe criticized for a little is we don't want to just hear from you guys, maybe you're detached. But we did thousands of discussions with large, small, medium, rural hospitals, individually, collectively. We did a Reddit poll. We did a bunch of surveys. So we tried to hear from other stakeholder groups as well. Who wants to go next?
I'll jump in.
Sure.
So one of the keys from my perspective, and we talk about kind of some of our passions. Number one, I did bring, as Emery said, visibility from a lot of the other manufacturers because I was a part of AdvaMed and on their consortium of cybersecurity, one of the co-chairs. Also, I was part of the nomination from MITA, so all of the imaging organizations represented. So when I came and had a conversation or discussion as a part of the task force, all that data, Rob's a part of the AVMED piece, we took that information back into those particular organizations and had them vet the feedback on that as a part of our assessment that went into the overall recommendations as one of the examples. From my perspective personally, I've kind of been around the block on this on a couple of different occasions. Thanks to a lot of work with different sets of researchers, kind of going back to Kevin Fu in this particular space, and in terms of the pacemakers and the cardiacs. I know the video and everything he said there excellently. I also have a personal passion around that, considering the fact that, from my perspective, my daughter just started and completed her residency in emergency medicine. So looking at the video, that's her standing in there and any other patient or life that's coming in. And it's real interesting being in this kind of a space and profession. When we had WannaCry, I got intelligence from the hospital, data just from the share networks that they have as emergency room physicians of activities that was happening in Chicago, even though she was in residency in Florida, of when some of the outbreak was still only happening in the UK, and we were experiencing, some of the overall Blue Death screen issue. So it intertwines with you in terms of having this in an area from a passion perspective. Me specifically, when it came to looking at in some of the reporting, I think you see the fact that the legacy, as you pointed out, is one of my major issues, and I've been known to be quoted and stated, in working with, as much as I love my customers to death from a health delivery organization, in some instances it is very hard, to pull some of the devices out of their cold, dead hands. So that's, everyone knows that, so it's not unknown. And then the other piece for me, obviously, is around you have to know the ingredients of what the exposures are. And so from a supply chain perspective, when it comes to software, bill of materials and understanding open source and everything that makes that component, that's the next foray that I'm pushing hard on. And that also was able to come out in the report.
Yeah, there's some of you looked at the schedule tomorrow morning. Daniel Beard is going to do a talk about how to generate, many ways to generate a software bill of materials. And just for those people who have heard it 10 times today and don't know what that means, briefly, if you look at the Hollywood Presbyterian compromise, it was a single Java library, JBoss version, in a single device. And the benefit of having that ingredients list, just like in our food, is if you hear an alert and you say this particular library is being attacked and hurting hospitals, you can answer 2 questions very quickly. Am I affected? And where am I affected? The other use is at purchase time. If you see these bill of materials and you see there's a lot of known vulnerabilities in vendor A, but vendor B has better hygiene, you can make a much more informed choice. So everyone says it's too expensive to buy a bunch of new pumps. If you have no incremental budget, whatever pumps you're going to buy next, we want to steer you towards better, more defensible, resilient, higher hygiene devices. So the bill of materials thing, Michael's been doing this voluntarily and really being a leader on this front. And we seem to have pretty broad support on that recommendation thus far. All right, who would like to go next?
I'll go next as the other device manufacturer on the task force. I think for me personally, I think Michael said it very well from the perspective of a device manufacturer, but also I think just in general, anyone participating in the task force, that for me personally, the value in participating in the task force, and perhaps my strongest motivation was really promoting transparency and collaboration when it comes to vulnerability disclosure and general security awareness. The reality is that, as we've stated here, there's a large number of legacy medical devices out in use today, and the transition to newer, more secure medical devices is not going to be easy. Yeah, it's going to take time and effort, and I think a way for us to facilitate that transition is to be transparent with the security issues that legacy medical devices have. How do you secure something that you don't know? And our customers, healthcare providers, caregivers, patients are in a predicament when you can't provide that type of information for them that's actionable. And then on top of that, promoting good secure development lifecycle practices. I would say actually product lifecycle practices, because some of it isn't even just about how you develop the medical device. Sometimes it's how you decommission the medical device or how you manufacture it and install it at a customer site. It's a fairly complex problem that requires security throughout the life cycle of these products. And so I think that was perhaps my own personal interest in the task force.
And in passing, we've mentioned coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs a lot today. There aren't that many yet. And just to tie together a few speakers, we had been pushing for coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs since the beginning. In fact, in our 5-star cyber safety framework and our Hippocratic Oath, star number 2 is basically, do you take help avoiding failure without suing the helper? We call it third-party coordination. And in it, the idea was availing yourself of willing allies that wanted to help you make your product safer without suing them. And later, Alan Friedman, who you met from NTIA, did a 1.5-year-long voluntary best practices open forum and convening where we did a safety critical working group and actually wrote a template, almost a Mad Lib that almost fits on a page where you can do your initial early stage, not a bug bounty, just a coordinated disclosure program saying we will not sue researchers acting in good faith. And this is a list right here of we keep a running list of who has one, and I just focused in on the medical ones. We have Siemens, Philips, Medtronic, Draeger announced on stage here 3 years ago, live. GE, Johnson & Johnson, which you just heard from Jen Ellis, how well that went just in time. St. Jude Medical, Orion Health, Abbott, and BD. So for my part, I always like to encourage good behavior. Can we please clap for the 2 vendors on stage that have them?
Hey, I would say no need to thank me for doing the right thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right on. I love their attitudes. Okay, so why don't we shift to someone who has to defend these indefensible networks?
I might be friends with them outside of here, but from the provider perspective, obviously we're our own worst enemies right now, in that we've really driven towards interoperability, which is really important to our patients, while balancing that with not having good security controls. And we kind of went on steroids with interoperability with meaningful use, and we weren't ready for that, and we still aren't ready for that, yet we're in that phase where we're sharing data. And I think related to biomed devices, although I appreciate the standards on the new devices, there's no way that even a large healthcare organization like Sutter Health could afford to replace, say, all of our MRI machines. We have 60 of them, and at $500,000 a pop, there's no way that I can go to my CEO and say, we need to replace all of them. So although I appreciate that we're fixing it going forward, we have to find a way to fix it going backwards too, because that's the only way that we're going to really solve the problem. The whole group collectively came up with, I think, some of the best recommendations we could to really solve it. And they're interdependent. All of them are important. I couldn't tell you, one over the other as being more important. I think they're equally as important. From the provider standpoint, I think, one, we don't have a lot of money to afford good security controls, yet we care about interoperability and providing the best care possible. And we have lots of other things, like lots of regulations. If I want to, as Sutter, help our physicians in California, where we're a corporate practice act, which means we can't employ them, I can't provide them the technology for free. If I do that, it's a stark and anti-kickback violation. I would love to help them, but there's really no solution to me helping them unless there's an exception to the stark and anti-kickback, so I have that ability. So there's lots of challenges that were identified, and just, as healthcare providers, as many of you sure know, we focus on following the regulations. we spend all of our money following all of those regulations, and in doing so, we don't have good cyber hygiene. We're not actually addressing the highest risk because we're worried about the reputation, the regulatory fines that might come with it. So one of the things that I was really passionate about in the report is really looking at harmonizing those laws so that we can focus them on the ones that we absolutely need to comply with versus, I think there was like 2,700 laws in the various states that we have to sometimes look at to analyze and decide which ones we have to comply. Well, that's really not what we should be spending our time doing. We should be evaluating from a risk management standpoint what we need to address, addressing our highest risk first and moving forward.
So we should have given this thing 3 hours. We didn't. How many minutes do we have left? 7 minutes. And we're not going to get questions from the previous one. Why don't we just let you ask your question from the previous one?
Just ask questions of everything.
Well, I saw my question is,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, my question was, my question was how do we do with the legacy?
Legacy.
Well, you answered part of it with the legacy devices, because even if they're not $500,000 devices, you still have the IV pumps. If you have a 300-bed hospital, you probably have 400 IV pumps.
Yeah.
And they're not, $10 a piece.
Yeah. I'd say I'll try to take a first stab at that. I'd say that it's going to have to take some sort of joint strategic effort with not just from medical device manufacturers, but also with healthcare providers or the customers of these medical devices at the table and figuring out, perhaps to a certain degree, opening the kimono and talking about the vulnerabilities that exist in legacy products that are unsupported by the manufacturer or current products, and what are the risks and considerations, being more open and upfront with the uncomfortable truths that all software has vulnerabilities, all software. So as a manufacturer and as a device company that's incorporating software into medical products, we need to accept that reality, and it's not a bad thing to have or find a vulnerability in software. It's a good thing that you're searching for it in the first place, right? And then raising awareness to your customers on what they can do to minimize or avoid the risk altogether.
Can I make one point there?
I can repeat it. Yeah.
All right. When we're saying this to customers, they're looking at like insurance that they're not going to see. And when people buy pumps, you're talking about it'll save them money. They don't see it. The cyber stuff is saving them money because it's something in the future that may never happen.
Yeah.
When they're buying a pump, they're looking at all the tubing and stuff. They can see that as a value.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think something that I've observed recently is that there is a cost to, I think, security vulnerabilities in general, managing. I would say a good way to help raise the awareness to that issue is actually talking about the vulnerabilities in these devices and the kind of crazy things that have to happen from a compensating control perspective.
And let me just say, that's why I think it's really important when you look at the report that, you don't just look at one section of the report, because the report's to specifically address some of those issues. We know that the communication is a challenge. So there are recommendations on how do we start better communicating those challenges and making sure that we have messages to say, how do we message those challenges if you're a small organization versus a large organization? How do we make sure that a security person can be successful and start messaging those things better? So, if you focus just on a specific recommendation, you may miss the bigger point, is that the whole book, the whole guide, the whole task force report collectively is about how do you move and change the culture and the ideas and the communications going forward.
I want to make you more whole than that too, because this is something I think I spent 7 months on. This is fast, so we'll follow up on it later. The first thing Bo said, I don't know if Bo's in the room, we were racking our brain on this, and Bo's like, we did a cash for clunkers to get unsafe cars off the road. It was an economic stimulus, but it also made cars safer. Maybe we could do a cash for clunkers. And I bring it back to the group, and everyone's like, oh, that could be a great idea. In fact, some of the manufacturers may find it in their own interest to have to support newer, safer devices, maybe we'll come up with a program. And then we said, okay, great, let's drain the swamp. And then Mayo Clinic and others said, yeah, but I've got this multi-million-dollar laser they don't make anymore, and I'm going to have this forever. So about a third of my equipment that wouldn't help with. Like, okay. So then we looked for a bunch of clever things that the CIA invests in and other whatnot. We find a way to handle those. And then we say, okay, good, let's drain the swamp. And then we realized, wait a second, there's devices today, with all the love of my heart I say this, that are still able to get through the FDA pre-market approval because there's nothing prohibiting yet an XP device today from getting through. Like, oh, okay, so we'll make some recommendations about how to make it harder to get an unsupported operating system through new devices. Great. Shut off the spigots, drain the swamp, Band-Aid the rest. All set. We're like, oh, wait. If there's Windows 12 comes out tomorrow, and we make a new startup tomorrow, it takes 6 years best case for us to do R&D and get through pre-market approval, and it's going to have 1 year of support left on it. And the average clinical deployment is 18 years, or for certain types of devices. Like, this is never going to work. We have to, the body and the soul have different rates of change. The TTLs are different. We got to reconcile those. So then we're like, are there alternative reference architectures? Do we need higher assurance, longer supported OSs? Is it inappropriate to use a commodity OS in a safety critical system? All right, let's come up with some grand challenge DARPA thing. We'll do a reference architecture. We'll loosely couple, the expectation is you'll have to have several OS updates throughout the lifespan of this thing. All right, we got that covered. And then I get a call from a senator saying he's being lobbied heavily because somebody wants to use Android KitKat in the clinical environment. I said, the only thing less defensible than Windows XP is Android KitKat. And then I call all my friends and they said, yeah, a lot of our new devices are on KitKat, on Android because it's a robust ecosystem, et cetera. So these are wicked problems, and we didn't solve them, but we flagged a lot of really cool stuff, and we started pointing people to the Hippocratic Oath as well, because if you're not going to get as much money, whatever you're buying this year, spend the money better. Not spend more money, spend the money better. And I think the work we've done with Suzanne and whatnot in the pre-market, post-market means the stuff coming through the pipeline will be a little better. And also the clinical simulations were part of that change of heart and the aha moment for some of the clinical administrators. I don't think we have to do this for all of these, and let me give you the last glimmer of hope. After 9/11, we weren't going to throw away all the airplane chassis in the world. So one of the smartest things we did with the least money was steel reinforced cockpit doors. So we're also talking to some people about, could we maybe make like an Amazon cloud speed bump that prevents SMB from just randomly hitting hospitals? What are those, and this is what I want this room to think of, what are those steel reinforced cockpit door moves we can do to take out a large chunk of exposure and risk on the old stuff while we beef up and improve the new stuff? So we're fighters. I think we saw some overwhelming things, but to a person, we'd never hit a roadblock and say, let's give up. In fact, now that we've published a report, I think a lot of us feel like it's the starting line, not the finish line. But I know we only got to one question. We're here all day tomorrow. We're doing a clinical tabletop simulation that may or may not allow us to surface and experience some of this stuff. But for right now, I really want to thank some part of the task force here for coming to HackerCons and sharing some of their wisdom, and perhaps some will be around for Q&A in the hallways and whatnot. And we're all very reachable, but for now, please thank them.